Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Elissa Weinzimmer. Elissa is an award-winning vocal health educator, presence coach, and the founder of Voice-Body Connection. After suddenly losing her voice at the age of 21, Elissa began studying the mechanics of voice. Over time, she developed a unique, concrete approach that empowers performers, leaders, and speakers to optimize their voices and share them more authentically. Elissa's clients include Broadway stars, television personalities, politicians, and CEOs. She has led workshops for WeWork, Equinox, Microsoft, eBay, Instacart, and more, and has been featured in Thrive, Global, Healthline, She Knows, Adweek, and Kajabi. Elissa earned her MFA in Theater Voice Pedagogy from the University of Alberta. Her teaching also draws upon her extensive training in Fis Marais, VoiceWorks, Hatha Yoga, and body-mind centering. Elissa is based in New York City and is currently working on her first book. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Elissa. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
My joy and pleasure, Dwight. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited about this. Elissa, I don't know how much you know about me, but for me, one of the focuses of the Give a Heck brand and the podcast, book, and everything in general in my life is understanding people's origin story. And part of that is because of my passion and excitement about the Marvel and Star Wars movies that come out. One of the things that frustrates me, though, is they always start in the middle. And then years later, they come back to the beginning. How crazy is that? Really, how do we get to know people if we don't know their origin? What their childhood was like, what their teenage years into adulthood, and now where they're at. So could you do me a favor, Elissa, and tell me your origin story and what key things from your childhood to adulthood that led you to where you're at currently?
Thank you so much for asking, Dwight. I agree with you about how important an origin story is, and I would love to share mine. I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've made the joke many times in my life that I came out of my mother's womb tap dancing. I don't know if that's actually the most accurate description because actually, like, I'm a tall, skinny girl, and like I did a lot of ballet growing up. I was actually not great at tap because, in tap, you got to bend your knees and get down towards the floor. And I'm very much like a stand up really tall and ballet type person. So long story short, it has been in my blood and my bones to sing and dance and perform and tell stories since I was very young. Some of my early memories are there was a community center, and I remember that I was taking one of like my first dance classes. And I just remember that there were colorful scarves, and we would run across the room and leap and throw the scarf. That's like one of my earliest memories. And it's still true. I mean, if anyone were to put a microphone next to me as I walk around my house, as I putter around my house, I'm like always writing ridiculous songs. This morning was especially rich. I was extremely energetic this morning, and I was singing songs to my dog Ernie about like, on a scale of 1 to 17, how cute are you? I'm making something up right now. But anyway, I've been this way my whole life. And I just like sound, I probably came out of the womb singing is like the truth, like making sound. And so in so my origin story is actually something that I've been giving a great deal of thought to recently, because I'm starting to understand it differently than I did for a long chunk of time. You know how maybe this is the reason Marvel and DC do what they do, is because, like the superheroes get to a certain point and then we're like, okay, let's go back and look. So I've been through a process lately where I'm going back and looking and understanding a couple formative things for myself differently. Namely, before I ever started taking any professional, especially singing or music lessons, I intuitively would write goofy songs like the ridiculous one I just sang you, and also like really simple, spiritual, mantra-like repetitive songs. And I remember that the way that I used to spend recess on the playground in elementary school, or as you say in Canada, I've lived in Canada for a chunk of time, so in grade school, um, I used to sit and improvise and write songs with a friend of mine. We would go as far back as you could go past the soccer field into this kind of like woody green area, and we would sit and like commune with nature and write songs. And then that was maybe like, let's say I was 8 or 9 or something. When I was like 9 or 10 or 11, that's when I really started learning do re mi fa sol la ti do. And I was like, oh, there's like structure and things I'm supposed to be doing. And oh, I could sing this song from this musical, and like I got to learn all these things. Like there's a whole landscape of stuff I need to learn. And I got good at that. And I put the Elissa writes her own songs thing, these like simple songs, on a shelf. And I didn't do it for years. And I was in a lot of musicals. I played Seidel and Fiddler on the Roof. I played, my favorite role ever was Adelaide in Guys and Dolls in high school. Did a lot of musicals, especially, were a big thing in my community. And then I moved from Northern California when I was 18 down to the University of Southern California to go to college in Los Angeles, and was still really deeply identified. I definitely always have been very into academics as well, but my identity has always been very deeply identified with my singing, my dancing, my performing. I was in an a cappella group, like standing around and doing bebop, be-doo, and all that type of thing. And actually, it was a lot of our syllable was always jin 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 jin. I'm singing so much for you on this podcast.
That's okay. I'm loving every minute of it.
Great. And so anyway, and then something, so this is like not the earliest formative years, but something pretty on the scale of my life, something catastrophic happened. And that was when I was 21. I was singing in my a cappella group. I was a senior at USC, fourth year, and I had a vocal hemorrhage. So my vocal folds bled. I had severe onset of acid reflux. I wound up just really the instrument that I had relied upon for my whole life, at least temporarily broke. And I had to go on vocal rest. I was told at the time the best practice was to go on vocal rest for a whole month. So I stopped talking. And during that period of time where also I did not yet understand, therapy or like excavating your feelings, I think I really emotionally and mentally shut down during that time as well. And I just made a decision to not perform anymore. So I completely dissociated from my identity as a performer. I didn't really know much besides theater, so I stayed in the theater as a director. And I also started to study the human voice. And I share all of this with you in this way because where I sit now, I'm 36 years old as we're recording this, is I'm circling back to my primary vocal practice. So I teach people voice. I have studied vocal health now for close to 15 years. I've been teaching for a decade, and I really feel that in order to teach about something or share about something, we have to continue to develop our own lived experience. And my current lived experience is returning back to the 8, 9-year-old girl who wrote these really simple songs and just intuitively knew how she wanted to use her voice. So this is a long-winded way of saying that voice is my thing. If people stamped us with our purpose on our forehead as we were coming out of the womb, my forehead would say voice. That's what it would say.
That's
And
awesome.
it's my thing. And it's been my thing since I was a kid. And I'm happy to share anything else about my childhood too, but that's, through the lens of what I do now.
It's amazing though, because you have identity, and I resonated with a lot of you talking about, even from tap dancing. I had all 5 of my kids were in dance at one point in time, all 5 of them.
Mhm.
My daughter, because of a injury, actually couldn't continue to go on with dance. My one daughter was supposed to go and train for the summer right after she graduated with the Winnipeg Ballet,
Oh, wow.
and she got injured in a quadding accident where I was
Mm.
with them, and she was on a quad and went off the side of a mountain. And she actually injured her leg so bad that she had to give up her passion. She still dances now, but she ended up going to school, she's a nurse now. She graduated last year. But
Wow.
it resonated with me when you're saying in my bones to sing, dance, and perform, because I used to hear that from my one daughter. Because
Oh,
the rest, you know how kids are, they drop off stuff, and some, it's a passion, they continue on. But as
yeah.
a parent, I give my kids opportunity to be in gymnastics, cheerleading, whatever they wanted, soccer, dance, it didn't
Yeah.
matter. So I really resonated with that. And I love the fact that you're writing the silly little songs in school. And that is amazing how young we can be. And that's why the origin is important to understand. Our roots of who we can be as an adult really stem from our childhood.
Yeah.
And it just takes time for us to have self-discovery. And you've gone
Yeah.
through that, obviously. And you've accomplished a lot. So one of the things, because as I mentioned to you prior to recording, I try to do enough research to make sure I understand things about people and the general connection. That same daughter, the dancer, um, she ended up having what you ended up going through, having mono, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which can be quite serious infection, that I have not experienced directly, but indirect, like I said, through my daughter. She had it in high school. It was so severe, she was hospitalized for
Oh, my.
close to 10 days. And yeah, it was terrible. It took her out of her passion for dance for quite a few months, actually. But it changed her outlook on life. And over the next month, she made many changes. Can you tell us more in detail that the experience for you and how it led up to you losing your voice?
Yeah, totally. Sometimes I skip over this part of the story, so thank you. Um, so, and I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to talk about a couple different episodes in my life where a
Sure.
health thing has, caused me to really land in a
Please do.
sense of
Yes.
purpose. Yeah.
Yes.
So what happened then? Okay, so if we zone into that time when I was 21, when I lost my voice, which is a very dramatic way to describe it. So here's more detail about it. Um, I I mean, I guess I've encountered this phenomenon multiple times in my life. I was burning myself out. I was working really hard, experiencing a lot of friction. I mean, obviously, this is stuff you know about. I was experiencing a lot of friction, like meaning not a lot of flow and ease in what I was doing. Um, and we're talking like, academically in school, extracurricularly in my personal relationships, like it just wasn't an easy chapter of life. And my I think it was maybe the first week of classes that year. I was really pushing myself. It was actually I have always been a theater director. That's always been very important to me. And I was about to direct a production of Cabaret. It was my first full-length show that I was going to direct. And I had been pouring energy into, I mean, I literally went to Berlin to do research. I was like pouring energy into working on the show. And I started feeling really sick. And so I went to the student health center. I think I had to return twice because the first time they said, you seem fine. We don't know what's wrong. Like you must just have a really bad cold. Um, and I went back and they swabbed me and I did indeed have mononucleosis. And the crazy part was I have no idea where I got it from, like none. And even my boyfriend at the time, I didn't stop kissing him and he never got sick. So like, but I did get some of the cast members of Cabaret sick. I was like,
Oh,
oh
oh
no,
my
I'm
gosh.
so
Eh?
sorry. Must have just been breathing in the same room or something. But
Well, my daughters,
anyway,
it started with a
yeah.
water bottle, a shared water
Oh,
bottle. And
really?
that's,
Like, yeah, I guess I never isolated where it came from.
yeah.
But anyway, so, this is a situation I would navigate very differently now in my life, knowing what I know. But I was a 21-year-old and um, I thought hustle above all else. Like, I was not willing to not direct the show. So I showed up to rehearsal. I did the stuff. I continued to like I pushed through that process with mono and was like, I'll rest when I'm done. And so that was basically the fall. And then I rested, but then the winter semester was starting, the spring semester in January. And I was like, well, that's all the time I have for resting. And so I sprung back into action. And wouldn't you know, my body was not done resting. And essentially, it all manifested it kind of moved into the propensity to lose my voice. And so basically, as I look at it now, it's like, that mono was a sign to slow down that I didn't listen to. My immune system was like, we need some rehabilitation time. And when I didn't listen to it, it weakened my immune system enough that I got even sicker in a different way. And I'm certainly better and learning from processes like this throughout my life, but I have to say it is my habit to push through stuff. It is, I suppose, what I was modeled and shown as a way of being in our society. And I have done it as well with a skin condition that I have. Actually, I know we'll talk more about Edmonton soon, I'm sure, but in my final semester of graduate school, when I was pushing to write my thesis, I pushed myself too hard and I have an ongoing lifelong autoimmune condition, psoriasis. It like shows up on your skin. And it was exacerbated by living in Edmonton after having, spent my whole life in California. My body was used to sunshine that it wasn't getting. And long story short, I had a massive flare of psoriasis. So like, I think what this really boils down to, and as someone whose work is voice body connection, body being a very operative word in there, it's about listening to my body, listening to my intuition, honoring what's actually going on instead of pushing through. And in the mono situation, multiple times with the psoriasis, I keep learning this lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I it resonated with a lot of what you said. Especially in society, we have learned behaviors where we always want to push and go past what our body's telling us. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're always trying to please others. And really, we need to be taught at a young age that if we don't please ourselves first, circumstances like what you went through could have been not necessarily avoided. You might have still got mono, but you, like you said, though, if you knew back then what you know now, you would have done things differently.
I would have rested.
Yeah, you would have rested.
Yeah.
And that's
Let myself rest.
yeah. So it's like you said, though, mono is sign to slow down. And I do know what psoriasis is. And, it is, you're right. It can be, I know people in our city that suffer from psoriasis. I know people in my family that do. It's actually common. More common. Yeah, it's more common than people realize. So thank you for sharing that, though.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important for people to understand there's so much misconception in regards to what mono is. And I know my daughter was ashamed, right? Because she went to Victoria Performing Arts School here at dance school, if you're familiar with it in Edmonton. She went there for high school, and it was really tough on her because she was type A. honor student, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden she gets mono and it's like, oh, did you kiss, what, blah, 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 blah,
The kissing disease. Yeah, exactly.
it's garbage. But anyway,
It's
we
true.
eventually tracked it down to the fact of shared water bottle, which I told her repeatedly never ever to do. And I don't know if she shared or she used somebody else's, but we tracked it down to what had happened, the outbreak. But it's thank you so much for sharing. And listeners,
Yeah,
it is
thanks for asking.
it's not the kissing disease. It can obviously it can happen that way, but it can happen from so many different other ways. We won't get into the details of that because
Not how I got it.
yeah, it's way too much for me to go through here, and I want to continue on. So you're living in California, correct?
I'm living in New York City, actually.
New York
now.
City.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So after the character building journey you've been through, you were looking for a change. So actually, at this point, pardon me, after the mono, you were still in California, or had you gone to New York already?
So the mono happened in California. That's
So
correct.
yes,
I was in Los Angeles.
so yes, so that's I didn't word my question right. I'm sorry. So
That's okay.
you were living still in California, and after that character building journey you had been through, you were looking for change and to develop your business voice body connection. Can you tell us more about this journey you went through and how yoga and meditation was helpful?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the truth is, I'll let you in on a little secret, Dwight and listeners.
Okay, I'm listening.
When I filed my doing business as in 2011 in Los Angeles, my business was called Elissa Weinzimmer Holistic Voice and Yoga Coach.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It barely fit on a business card. But I didn't know what to brand yet. In fact, I don't think I actually rebranded it to Voice Body Connection until 2016. So my first 5 years in business was like basically just operating as my name and calling myself a holistic voice and yoga coach. And yeah, so okay, I guess I'll share a little bit of my journey about what I did to heal myself, because ultimately those were the puzzle pieces that I then started putting together to help others. So I took my first yoga class when I was in 8th grade, living still up in Northern California. And I remember my teacher. I remember the community center. I remember the smell of it. I remember that the first time I ever did Shavasana, lying on your back in corpse pose, she came around. She had lavender oil on her hands. And she put her thumbs in the center of our forehead and then moved her thumbs over our eyebrows with lavender oil. And I was like, am I in heaven? It was so cool. So I actually experienced yoga at a very young age. I guess I was like 13, and I didn't forget that experience. I was very distracted by, ballet and musical theater and school and all the things. I didn't have a lot of guidance to invest aside from like going to that class for a chunk of time. When I graduated from the University of Southern California, I had just had this experience losing my voice and didn't trust myself to become. I think I had an idea that I was going to hop on a plane back then, move to New York City, and start auditioning for Broadway shows. But now I was like, I guess I don't have a voice, so I guess I'm not going to do that. So I decided to stay in LA. I started directing theater, was kind of like, my poor starving artist hustle. And in terms of work, I started like working at restaurants and nannying and all sorts of stuff like that. And the other piece was that I, of course, to some degree, needed to figure out what had happened to me. New York City over here. So I'll just pause for a second.
That's okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to figure out what had happened to me and my voice. And that was a really slow burn process. And I'll give some vocabulary that I understand now that I didn't understand then, which was the first thing I needed to do was calm myself down, calm my nervous system down. Because it was a really traumatic experience. Like in the lens of my life, my voice was the most important thing, and then it was gone. And I just had to like totally pivot everything that I had thought I was going to be doing. So some of the first stuff I turned to, and it was very intuitively, is I started going back to yoga. I found a yoga studio really close to where I moved in Los Angeles, and I was just going for myself to go to yoga. And I started getting curious. I mean, obviously I'd heard about meditation and I was curious, and it's been a whole journey of learning all sorts of different things about meditation over the years. But I started exploring meditation. And then specifically, I also, you mentioned it in the bio that you read at the beginning. Um, I had a teacher at USC who taught a practice called Fitzmaurice voice work. And then I also wound up having my speech language pathologist who helped me rehabilitate after my vocal injury also taught Fitzmaurice voice work. So it was sort of all signs point to Fitzmaurice voice work, which is a very holistic, full body approach to the voice, a theater technique. And, we would actually be doing these things, which you might find this type of practice in somatic experiencing, which is a psychological practice, or in other worlds like bioenergetics. But we would like be on the floor with our legs in the air, tremoring, like shaking and making sound and just like freeing our bodies. And I was like, whatever voodoo magic we're doing, it's working. My voice is becoming freer. And so basically, those were the building blocks that started to help me find myself again. And so the first things I did over the course of those early years was get certified in Fitzmaurice voice work, get certified in yoga, and start my own meditation practice. And they have just continued to be building blocks. And going back to what I said about the human nervous system, now any class I teach, anytime I hold space for anyone, I'm always coming back to what are the stimuli in this environment, in this moment, that could cause someone to feel unsafe, to like go into activation, into fight or flight mode, into anxiety. If those stimuli are present, it is first important to establish safety and comfort before doing anything else, like before doing any vocal exercise. Basically, another way of saying it is that my body, my nervous system needs to be in a regulated state for me to really absorb any information and change in any effective way. So I always come back to meditation, yoga, breathing, movement, sounding, like all of these worlds that I've blended into the work that I now do as a way to arrive in the present moment, ground in the safety of what is. And if it, hopefully it is safe. If it's not, then, that's a separate issue. But, and from there explore. So I hope that kind of
Oh,
answers why yoga and meditation mean so much to me.
well, everything you discussed, though, is things that I believe, along with many other things that our school systems need to start teaching at a very young age, maybe
Yes.
even later elementary school into middle school or junior high, what we call it here.
Yeah, as
Because
early as possible, as far as I'm
yes,
concerned.
because your mind body connection, which is what I wrote down, is so imperative. And for you to discover even that lavender oil on your head in the eighth
Yeah.
grade, it's just, that's amazing to
Yeah.
have that connection and that realization of the smells and just everything is great, because that's part of who you are. And you were already starting back then to have a mind body connection, but sometimes it takes, if it had been fostered better in our school systems, whether it's US or Canada, we both have broken school systems. I'm not
Yeah.
saying everything's broken. They don't do enough mind body connection teaching people how to deal with those anxiety moments, or
Yes.
understanding anxiety and depression, the differences, and just the little things that we could do to help them have better home lives, better relationships in school. I think they would learn better, they'd sleep better. Our health issues would be less, even in our youth, because they get sick, and it's stress induced or whatever the case may be. So
Totally.
I appreciate you sharing that, because
Yeah.
um right, you establish safety and comfort, as you had mentioned, right?
Yep.
By understanding your mind body connection and the little things that we can, and none of us are perfect, even if all the certifications and knowledge that you've got at your young age of 36, you still will never stop learning till the day you take your last breath. You'll have moments in your day, and I say moments because the listeners, listeners that listen, and the people that know me quite well, I always tell people, I never have bad days anymore.
Hmm.
Why? Because it's what I tell myself. I have bad moments within my day. And then I have specific processes, but this isn't about me, that I coach people on, that I utilize for myself to understand those moments and get past those moments so that I never have a bad day, right? I'll have a bad moment. And certainly things that you talk about can help you.
Yeah.
Meditation. If you're having a bad moment, what a great way to get over meditation, or pardon me, to help get over it is use meditation.
Yes.
I use gratitude exercises. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different things that can help us with our voice, and feeling our internal voice with our mind body connection. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
The next thing I'd like to know, what exactly is the study of mechanics of presence?
Oh, great question. And it actually goes into what I would say more about from everything I was just talking about. So perfect. So I really like using the phrase nervous system because a lot of times we say brain, which is great. It's part of the nervous system. It's one of the biggest parts of our nervous system. It's the mothership. But the entire human nervous system is brain, spinal cord, all peripheral nerves. And what is our nervous system? It is a recording machine. It records everything that has ever happened in our life, specifically to store information so that if we get those stimuli again, we have a bank to draw upon to be like, oh, this was like that. And basically, what our nervous system is trying to do is protect us, right? Because I used the phrase regulated. When our nervous system is regulated, we're in like this easy state that I like to call stay and play. We're able, we can do another phrase for it is tend and befriend, like you and I are doing right now, Dwight. We can hang out with each other and enjoy each other's company and feel really like a sense of bonding and curiosity and joy in this space, right? It's very much actually when you describe how I imagine that what you're doing when you get out of a bad moment back to a good day is that you regulate your nervous system. You come back to a place of expansion in your thinking and perspective. Well, those deregulated or dysregulated nervous system states are there for a really good reason to protect us, right? So fight or flight, which is like what we get knocked down to first, is this quality of like heart beating really fast, vision narrows, deal with threat, punch it, run away from it, right? The horn is like, yep, exactly. And then if the threat doesn't go away or if fighting or fleeing doesn't work, we actually can even dysregulate further down to a state which I like to nickname freeze and collapse. If we stay for a long time in freeze and collapse, we wind up depressed if we get stuck there. If we stay for a long time in fight or flight, we wind up anxious. We get stuck there. But everyone has the capacity, all of us, to regulate our nervous system. We just might get really lodged in nervous system patterns. So, okay. So then what is presence? Presence is a regulated nervous system. And what happens when we're having a regulated nervous system? I know, Dwight, you and I are looking at each other through Zoom right now, which so many of us do these days, but there's still a quality where we're making eye contact. And I can see literally in your eyes, I can see that your eyes are in focus and you can see that mine are too. And if we were looking past each other, or if our eyes weren't quite like making contact, if they were kind of receding, that would actually be an indication that our nervous system was dysregulated, was not regulated. And by the way, I do want to give some context to everything I'm saying right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Just so people, if they're fascinated with all of this nervous system stuff, can do your own research more. There's lots of different places to understand the human nervous system. Trauma, like you say, trauma research is a great way, lots of different psychological perspectives. But my favorite theory about this that I'm really using as a lens right now is called polyvagal theory. The founder of polyvagal theory is Dr. Stephen Porges, Porges. And there's specifically a researcher named Deb Dana, spelled exactly like you would imagine, Deb, Dana. And I've learned so much from Deb Dana's book, which is called The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy. So it's for clinicians, but it's for everybody. So anyway, just want to give that context. So a state of presence, because we use this word a lot of different ways, right? We say, oh, that person has so much presence, like it's something you have. And like either you're born with it or you're not. But it's not actually something you have. It's something it's a space, it's a state of regulation in which you are resting inside. And it is that regulated nervous system state. It is stay and play. It is tend and befriend. It is when my eyes are in focus. It's when my breathing is appropriate to the situation, which in fairness might sometimes mean that it's not calm. It might actually be appropriate sometimes for my breath to get elevated. It's when my voice is able to go up and down in pitch and be expressive in accordance with whatever I want to express. It's when my body language is free and I don't feel stuck and I don't have that feeling of like, what do I do with my hands, or, that type of thing. This is all presence. And so when I say the mechanics of presence, it's actually all the puzzle pieces that I'm naming right now, because the cool thing is that when we understand all of this, we can actually reverse engineer our way into presence. We can be like, well, do you know how to focus your eyes? I'm holding my water glass up, right? For those of you watching. Okay. I just focused my eyes on the water glass. I moved my eyes away from the screen and onto the water glass, and now I'm going to move them back to the screen. I do know how to focus my eyes, and you do too. You're great at it. So when we start to study the mechanics of eye focus, freeing the body language, freeing the breath, freeing the vocal expression, really listening. Our ears are another useful tool for presence. That is when we are able to, quote unquote, have more presence, have more confidence, be more authentic. And it is actually something that you can measurably work towards. And by the way, it's not something that you never had. You definitely had it. You just might be dysregulated.
Well, society crushes it and kills it in us
That's it.
because of our associations and what we do and what we allow within our world, our own little worlds, right?
Yes.
You and I
Yes.
each have our own little world. But today,
Mhm.
right at this moment, our worlds overlap and they coincide and we're working
Mhm.
together, which is what unity is and what it should be. I love how
Yeah.
you put the fact the nervous system's our recording machine. You know, the first thing that popped into my mind was what
Yeah.
we talked about in the prior uh, conversation was the oil on the head from
Oh,
you,
okay.
right? So that is a recording mechanism when they did the lavender oil on your
Yeah,
head,
yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, yes,
right?
yes. Yeah.
That immediately popped into my head because that is your body recorded that,
My body
as well as
recorded
this,
that experience.
as well as
Exactly.
the smells and you said you could visualize it. That was all
That's what a
recorded
memory
because
is.
exactly. But I love how you're right though. It isn't about everybody talks about the brain, but really our brain is tied to our nervous system. So our five senses
Yes,
and our body records
exactly.
that five senses through our nervous system, which our brain records. It's a giant computer. But without the nervous system, our brain is pretty much what? If we didn't have five senses tied to our nervous system, what we wouldn't have those. Even when I look at a picture, listeners, for those that know me well, I'm a picture freak. I have so many pictures, and I look at pictures, and if you connect to that memory of that picture, what was taken, it evokes what? It invokes something in your brain, but it was recorded through what? The experience when you took that picture, the sights, the sounds, the smells,
Yes.
the joy you felt in your. I can even think, I can look at a picture and I can experience what my chest felt like because I was proud, or you know what I mean? Or I look at a picture and there's sometimes not always the best feelings, right? But there's still a picture and I'll feel kind of, oh, I wish I would have been there longer. Maybe I should have been present more. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So yeah, I love this conversation.
well, and if I
And that's why
may,
I brought it up.
oh,
Absolutely.
I'm
Go ahead.
so glad. If I want to piggyback on something you just said, because it's so beautiful and it is exactly the premise upon which I do my work. You said you can look at a picture and remember what you felt like in your chest. So I'll take this even a step further. Yes, senses, including our sixth sense, which I believe lives in every single cell of our body. The the smallest building block of your nervous system is your cells. And every cell has its own recording ability, its own consciousness, its own ability to. And so when you feel that feeling in your chest, there's a cellular memory. There's an embodied memory in your body that you can call back. And this is actually a moment exactly like that is exactly how I help people understand how to find their voice and speak their truth, because you can go back to that moment that maybe happened 40 years ago, who knows, and be like, okay, my chest felt tight. And I think it was because I was just like swelling with pride about what I was watching, and my emotion about that was unbridled joy mixed with sadness all at the same time. And it made me want this moment to last forever. Like, it made me want to express my appreciation and my joy. And isn't it beautiful that, like, maybe you never, like, what if that scenario is like, you were watching your kid in a play or something, right? And you never told your kid you felt that way. And now 40 years later, like, you can call back that memory and say that, and that can 40 years later, that can transform the relationship, you speaking that truth, which you recorded in your embodied presence in that moment.
Well, it
It's
helps us
amazing.
with our story too, because so if I look
Mhm.
at that picture, we'll use that example, and I'm
Okay.
looking at when
I
my
made up
kids,
a story about it.
we look at our kids, and like for me, I look at my children or my grandkids or even pictures of my past. And if I'm connected to that experience, and our nervous system, as you talked about, is recording that stuff, the experience in my mind, when I look at that picture, even if it was 30, 40 years later or whatever, if I'm connected to the present, right? People live too much in the past. They're depressed.
Sure.
They live too much in the future. They're angry. I want to live in the present. So when I look at that picture, I'm not necessarily living in the past, but I'm living in the present. So I can look at that and go, wow, like you just mentioned, maybe I should have mentioned something. And if I've lived life as a story, that every single nervous system experience that's going into my brain as a future story that I need to tell, and I look at that picture and I go, maybe I should have said something. It's never too late,
It's
listeners or
never
people
too late.
watching,
Exactly. You can do
to
it now.
contact that person and tell them the story that your nervous system recorded in your brain, right?
Exactly right.
Being a
Yeah.
storyteller and living through our stories is so imperative. It
Yes.
really is, because really we're defined by our experiences, our memories, if we choose them to be a defining moment in a good way. Well, obviously we have memories that are bad, but you don't live in the past, right? You learn, like the past is not indicative of our future, and too many people think it is. They label people because of the past, and then that person's changed 5, 10 years different, and they're thinking, well, that person did that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or whatever. Get over it, people. Life is today, living in the present. Use your past as a stepping stone to your better self today in your present, and still worry about the future, right? The future is going to be there. Live in that memory, right? But don't let that control your life. Share that memory when it needs to be shared. If you didn't share it, as you mentioned, and I have stuff like that comes up. My kids
We
will
all
see
do.
pictures that I'll post of their past or whatever, and one of them will reach out to me maybe that day, or it could be months later. Hey, Dad, that picture you put up, or do you have pictures of this event? I have this kind of memory. Oh, sure. And I go into my 150,000 photos that I have, and I'm not exaggerating, digital photos that I've taken since 2003 when I got my first digital camera. I've got more than 150,000 photos, right? I literally do. Because here's another thing. You and I are hanging out. People say, why are you taking so many pictures? Right? Okay. Why? Because I never know what I'm going to capture. Well, do you go in it if I do that, I go in and I delete 7 of the 8. Why? If I look at those pictures, Elissa and I'm taking pictures of Elissa and I hanging out, or we're with friends, and some of them are selfies, and I take 6, 7 of them. There's little minute differences, because that memory that I'm creating is that important to me, that I can go, oh, I remember telling Elissa, hey, smile bigger, or can you turn this way? Because it's a recording. By me taking those extra pictures and keeping them, it connects to my nervous system, which recorded in my brain. So
That's
anyway,
right.
I'm not gonna I can get
Love
on the
it.
soapbox, right? So
No, it's great.
I love the mind body connection. I talk about it all the time. So One of the things I wanted to talk about in 2011, you started and founded Voice Body Connection. However, still yearned to learn more due to your students wanting more knowledge. You ended up a year later moving to my home city of Edmonton to attend the University of Alberta, which is world renowned. Most people don't realize that our university is that it well, it is. It's very
It
world renowned.
is. I know. You're right. It's a really good university.
And our city is amazing. Obviously, it doesn't get as much sunshine as a side note as California, but in Canada, we get the second most days of sunshine a year. We get over 320 days of sunshine a year. People take it for granted because they look outside and see 3 feet of snow, but they don't realize, hey, it's sunny out.
There were so many beautiful sunny days in the
I
snow
love
in Edmonton. It's
Yeah,
amazing. It's so
yeah.
beautiful.
So it is, as I said, it's amazing school, and Edmonton is my home for the last 34 years. I don't know if I mentioned that. It might have been prior to us recording. What made you decide to attend a Canadian university? And can you tell us what the experience was like, both going to the U of A and living in Edmonton?
Yes, I would love to. So I got certified in Fitzmaurice voice work, yoga. I started teaching as Elissa Weinzimmer holistic voice and yoga coach. Sometimes 2 people would show up to class. I'd be like in a ballet studio or a theater. I'd just like teach whoever showed up. And then I got a job, actually, a teaching job at the New York Film Academy in Los Angeles. Confusing, but at the Los Angeles campus. And I had a really cool opportunity to really start teaching curriculum. And my students would ask me questions, and I would go like about, all sorts of different things, about presence, about the vocal cords, about volume. And I would go, that's a great question. Let me study for 6 months and I'll get back to you, was kind of what would come up for me. And so after a handful of times, having that come up, like, I just realized I really wanted to study more. And by that time, I had gotten very involved in a couple different professional organizations, namely one called VASTA, which is the Voice and Speech Trainers Association. It is mostly theater practitioners who teach theater, voice, and speech. And I had gone to a couple conferences, and at those conferences, meeting different voice teachers, many who taught at different universities around North America, especially, and throughout the world, I started to realize I'd like to really, truly be one of them. And in order to do so, I would like to go to grad school. And at first I thought maybe I would go to grad school for acting or directing or something, and like sort of, glean as much voice work as I could. But then I started to realize there are only a handful, but there were a few specifically voice programs, vocal pedagogy in a drama department. Usually you find vocal pedagogy in a singing department. And the options at the time were at Harvard, at Virginia Commonwealth University, in London at the Central School. And then there was a program that someone who I had really connected to, Betty Moulton, had founded at the University of Alberta. So there's really 3 big reasons that I went to the University of Alberta. One, Betty, and I'll add in there David, my other voice mentor, who actually has since then become my business partner. Betty and David, the mentorship was number 1. The next reason was there were only going to be 2 people in my program. So I was actually going to get to do a great deal of independent research, teaching, building my own study situation for myself rather than being shepherded through a really defined program. And the third was I thought it was really cool to go to Edmonton, like to go somewhere really different. And funny story about it. So I had like, a going away party with all my friends in Los Angeles. And as I was preparing to leave for Edmonton, my friends in LA were like, wow, you're moving to where? I had, by the way, Dwight, I do have to admit, I had never heard of Edmonton before. I was like, you teach where, Betty? What school? What province is that? And And so I got to know Edmonton, and I was telling my Los Angeles friends, as I was getting ready for this going away party, I was like, I'm moving to Edmonton, Alberta. And everyone was like, that's so cool. Like, no one leaves Los Angeles to move to Edmonton. Like, you rock. I felt that way too. Then I got up to Edmonton, I arrived, and everyone was like, you came here from Los Angeles? Are you crazy? And I was like, no, you guys seem cool. I'm glad I'm here. And that cools off pretty quickly, but it was really funny. Everyone was like, why did the Los Angeles girl come to Edmonton? But it really was the right program for me. I can't speak highly enough about the mentorship I experienced. Another big reason I wanted to be at the program at the U of A, which at least doesn't exist in the same way now as it did when I was there. But I was able to cross train to some degree with the speech pathologists as well, which is another route I had considered going at a certain point. So it was just a really, really incredible opportunity to answer all those questions that I needed to study in order to be able to answer. And I came out a completely different teacher and person than when I entered that program.
That's amazing. Plus, you also got to experience 4 seasons where my Cali friends, which I have so many of them, I talk to them and people don't realize they can jump in a plane and you can be at LAX in 3.5 hours.
It's a really easy flight.
It's not that far, right?
No,
there's been more Canadians, obviously, that have gone to California than the opposite way. But
exactly.
I have to agree, though, it would change you, not just the program that you were in, and that, Betty and David, and you were 2 people in the program and you got to train with a speech pathologist and learn stuff. The environment of Edmonton and the community that we live in, and the 4 seasons, you get to see so much variety. I don't know how much you interacted outside of your schooling, but I love my city. For the listeners that are, you're from California, because there'll be people that listen to this because you're on the show. Edmonton and area is 1.2 million people. We're not like a little small hamlet. People in the US have such a vague knowledge of Canada, which is fine. It's not the same way. We know lots about the US, but
I know you know so much about us.
Right? Exactly. California. Well, I know you're in New York now, but California itself is it's not much smaller than our whole country. So you're the one state. But I love that you teach whoever showed up. That was the best comment that you made in just the last little blurb of our conversation, because you know what? When I start, some podcasts I can have hundreds of people and another one's 15 people. You know what? I used to worry about the numbers, or you post stuff, or I wondered, I used to, when my book first came out in March, I was looking to see how many it sold. I haven't looked in months. I don't care. Why? Because all I'm looking for is to teach, to resonate, to help somebody, one person. When I'm speaking on stage, just connect, because you know what? Everybody says they can't make a difference. That's a bunch of poppycock. One person at a time. One person at a time. You are changing the world.
Yeah.
You could be that person's salvation and helping them understand and literally stop them from wanting to, it's going to sound harsh, kill themselves, suicide.
Totally, sure.
Right? Because we aren't in connection with our own our own body part of me. So when other people we're not picking up on their body language, they're signaling what they're saying, their tonality, right? They're so important, right? Vocal variety and tonality and listening to people. I've been a student of human nature. I started in 1993 with How to Win Friends and Influence People. Was the first book that somebody
Good place to start.
Right. And I've been working on myself ever since. Roller coaster ride. We all have those in our lives. And we have, we live in the valley of despair, but all the things that we learn and the people we associate with, somebody can say that one thing that can pivot and change your life. And for the listeners, if somebody's done that, please reach out to them, let them know. Right? Because I know people that have changed people's lives and quit doing what they were doing because they didn't feel appreciated enough. Because another thing that I coach on, my favorite book of all time is The 5 Love Languages, just so you know. I've
Good choice.
gone through that book 5 times. It's not about, people have a misconception that it's about relationships, like connections with sexual relationships with, you know, people in general, significant
It's about how
others,
you
but it's
connect to anyone.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that person's love language could have been words of affirmation, which is mine.
Yeah.
My primary are words of affirmation and acts of service. We have some of all of them in there. So somebody like me, I could get disheveled and be sad because I don't feel like I'm being appreciated. And if one person tells me through a comment on a post, or they send me a voice message, or whatever the case may be, that, hey, you made a difference in my day. And I get that happening the odd time. Strangers DMing me going, I listened to your podcast, and it changed my life. Or I listened to your vlog, because my listeners know, and you probably don't. I started on March 1st, 2020 doing a vlog, and I have not missed a day of doing a live vlog, right? I'm at
Oh my goodness.
406. I think I'm at 465 days now.
That's
amazing.
amazing.
And so I do them every single day. They range from 3 minutes to as high as 10 minutes, right? Averaging around 5 minutes. But I have people DMing me going, that conversation, what, I needed to hear that. Thanks so much. Well, guess what, listeners? Me doing that, putting myself out there, being vulnerable on specific topics, if it changes your life by you reaching out and telling me it helped you out, it gives me energy to want to do it. Because there's days, trust me, if you've never done live videos, and I've done 460, whatever it is, there's days where I don't want to do it.
I bet.
Right. And I've had it's taught me to journal better. I have a running OneNote where I have all my thoughts that I put in there. So even the notes that I've been writing, I'll go through here and I might think, oh, wow, that's awesome. I'll go to my OneNote, type. I might not talk about it today, but when I'm struggling, I'll go through and I'll look at my journal and my thoughts I put in there. And it'll spark something in me, and it'll give me that energy, that drive that I need to do that video, because I'm always thinking, I want to change one person's life. And if I don't do that video, I guess it's kind of that FOMO thing, fear of missing out. I'm worried that if I don't do my video now, that one person that looks forward to it every single day, and I'm not saying that I'm that important, but I've experienced enough people messaging me that it has made a difference, that now I am become to using FOMO for a good reason, so that I don't let somebody down, that they could be on that cusp of teetering on the scale. And I want to make sure I'm constantly giving my energy to help better others, because when they give me that message back, guess what they do to my love language? Guess what they do to my love tank? They fill it up, right? So sorry for the longer.
Oh, that's so great. No, it's beautiful to hear. Thank you.
So you're welcome. And thank you for yours as well. I got so many questions. We're probably going to have to do another podcast, but yes, a part 2, but I'm going to go on to this one here. A life changer for you with your vocal recovery was learning from one of your professors, vibration exercises for muscle tension. I have friends who are singers in Canada, people who speak professionally as well, and they've had challenges at times with their voice. I am fascinated by anything that can help people perform and be the best they can be. You ended up creating a company with your professor called Vibrant Voice Technique, teaching people how to use a vibrator for their voice. Can you please tell the listeners and I what is involved in this process?
Yes. So when we say a vibrator, we mean a vibrator. Yes. Like that kind.
Yeah.
So David Lee, who I mentioned was one of my 2 grad school professors, he came up with this idea. He was working with an Edmonton-based performer, helping her release some muscle tension in her throat that was causing vocal fatigue. And there's a technique that you can do that, like, a speech therapist can do, where they manually manipulate your larynx, your voice box. So move it around. It's called circumlaryngeal massage. And this person was not responding well to that. There was like a gag reflex when she tried to touch pardon me, when she tried to touch the front of her own throat. And so David got to thinking, he was like, okay, I know there's tension in there. What can I do to break up the tension? And ding, light bulb moment. He was like, how do you feel about going to the love shop? And so they went and got like, you know, a little pocket rocket, we call them, like a little, and tried it, and it worked. And I do have to say, it's not just about like putting a vibrator on your throat. It's, and some people make this misconception. It's also not about putting a vibrator inside your throat. Please don't try to swallow it. But there are exercises that David came up with that he teaches along with the using the vibration for, you know, proprioceptive and kinesthetic purposes that really allow a neuromuscular release. And so, you know, it's 2012 when I come up to Edmonton for the first time to check out coming to the University of Alberta. And I lost my voice in 2007, but 5 years later, I was still really struggling. I did not have my stamina back. I still did not feel that I could rely on my voice in any significant way. I couldn't go back to performing. And David showed me these exercises, and they changed my life. I was like, as I started to practice them, I started to get my voice back for real. I started to really be able to untangle something that no one had even named to me up to that point, which was muscle tension dysphonia, the clinical diagnosis for having muscle tension that is dampening the quality of your voice. So I was so helped by the vibrant voice technique process that David had come up with that I spent 5 years building a business with him. And so that's how that all happened. At one point, I think it was in 2013, there was a big media blitz and people all over the world started to pay attention. And that's actually when we really started building the business out of necessity, because people were getting in touch with him from all over being like, we'd like to learn this, like, please show me how. And he couldn't teach enough private sessions in his office at the University of Alberta. And, you know, people couldn't all fly in. So we started hosting online workshops and started a mailing list. And if anyone is curious about this, there is a online course that you can take to learn all the exercises of vibrant voice technique, and that is available at vibrantvoicetechnique.com.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Right? But that's how anything is created, is again what the mind of a person can believe they can achieve. So, you know, he understood somebody was having challenges, and you working with him, you figured out techniques, and with something as simple as a sex toy, which is
with a sex toy.
Yeah, which is what, there's nothing wrong with that, because look at all the developments in life that have happened because people have looked around them. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they find out what's out there and repurpose it for something else.
And by the way, just to say, Dwight, this is one of David's favorite things to say about it. The vibrator was the 5th most common household electronic appliance in the 1920s. Guess what happened? It might have even been like in the decade before that. And then in the late 1920s, vibrators started to appear in what are called stag films.
Yeah.
And suddenly they became a lewd object. But there are advertisements. Email me and I'll send them to you so you can see them. There are advertisements like from the Sears Roebuck catalog where people are like, happy gentlemen are holding vibrators on the top of their head, or women are using it on their cheeks to like firm their skin. Like, it's not actually a new idea is the crazy part. So
well, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So I got a couple more things I want to ask. I love your personal mission in life, which is to express yourself authentically and fully, and to empower others to do the same. Can you share with the listeners things that you can do to be their most authentic self and share this with others?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend a book. There's a book called The 4 Agreements. Do you know this book, Dwight?
Yeah, I've read it.
Yeah. So Don Miguel Ruiz, and the first of the 4 agreements is be impeccable with your word. And I am very, very much in alignment with Don, with Don Miguel. That's essentially what I'm saying is like, I aim to be impeccable with my word. I aim to say what I mean. One thing I will say is when I say the words express yourselves authentically and fully, fully doesn't mean every single thought that comes to my brain needs to be expressed. Fully is a sense of balance where what does need to be expressed gets expressed. And maybe what doesn't need to be expressed, what isn't necessary, what isn't kind, what isn't truthful, what isn't the right time, does not need to be expressed. By the way, those things I just named are called the Buddhist gates of speech. Um, and so, yeah, so it's really authentic expression doesn't mean saying everything that comes to your head. It means speaking with intentionality, with embodiment, and with impeccability with your word. That's what it means to me.
Well, and he's speaking impeccably and not saying everything. Too many people feel they're entitled to say whatever they want, whenever
Yep.
they want. And
Sure.
I've been teaching people for years, my clients, people I coach, my kids, have a filter. You can think
Mhm.
it, but doesn't mean you should say it. Because just you don't have the right to tear anybody else down
That's
because you
right.
figure you can just dump on them.
It's not kind.
Wordsmithing is so important. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's something I coach on all the time and I've believed in for over 30 years, raise my children that way, coach people on it,
Mhm.
because it's listeners, think about the fact that you literally have told the story in a group of 10 people, let's say, or even 3
Mhm.
people, 2 people, and they'll interpret it both differently, right?
Mhm.
And so it's so important when you do share with others that you think about and be intentional with your words, because
Mhm.
wordsmithing means you care enough to utilize the right words to ensure that you have a higher potential of the person understanding what you're trying to lay down, right? So
Mhm.
I love that. And the 4
Mhm.
agreements, amazing. I
Mhm.
highly suggest the listeners, if you haven't read or listened to it, because you can find it on Audible as well.
It's short, it's easy.
Oh
Read it.
yeah,
Read it,
yeah,
read it and read it again, just like you do with
yeah.
the the 5 love languages.
Yeah, well, see, I'm a huge Audible fan now. I read the
Mhm.
5 love languages. The first time I read it was in 1993. That was a huge year for me for self-development. I've read the book twice and I've listened to it 3 times in Audible.
Love it.
Yeah, the last time I listened to it was in 2018. And
Mhm.
I need to listen to it again. And every time
Time.
I listen to a book or read a book or whatever you want to do, listeners, or do a combination of both. I know people that have the book and listen to it and follow. Bottom line, if you are present, always be present when you're doing self development, you will pick up new information first, second, third, fifth. It doesn't matter how many times,
Mhm.
right? You just
So
have to
true.
be present with whatever you do.
So
So,
true.
Alyssa, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Love it. I would say you got put in this body in this lifetime for a reason, for a purpose. And, Dwight, you've spoken so much today about service and being of service. And you just spoke about being present, which is, our whole thing. And we are human beings, not human doings. So we can always come back to our state of being. And in any given moment, if I just refocus my eyes, let my breath arrive in this moment, am fully present, regulate my nervous system, arrive here, I will get an intuition about what I want to do next. And that what I want to do next is actually my purpose. In that given moment, it's my purpose. And, you know, the universe will move us around in all sorts of magical ways, like down the block to grab a coffee, but then you run into your friend who you haven't seen in such a long time. And you bring joy to their day by seeing them and having a conversation. So you're here for a purpose and you're getting moved around by something bigger than you as long as you stay present and listening to the signals to move. And to me, that's the reason to give a heck, because in the long run, that's going to, just like you said before, Dwight, that's going to be the service that you get to offer to the world and the people around you, which is then going to feed you in return.
I love that. I love that. Right. It's, yeah, service of others is so important. Um, we just have to be present, and it's not something that comes natural. You have to work on it. You have to be self-aware of where are you at in that moment. Just like, and you talked about, so we talk about presence. Many people, let's say we're having this conversation, aren't present. They're thinking about, like, I look outside right now and it's downpouring rain here. I could
Oh,
be
is
going,
it?
I could let that distract me, or my dog, or whatever. Or I can choose to give you my presence because you're giving me your presence. So they
Yeah.
overlap. And that is such a special gift people just take for granted. The ability to be present with others, connect with them. So anyway, I appreciate your response.
Yeah.
So our time is almost up, and I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
Yes, of course. So my website is voicebodyconnection.com. I will direct you to, I mean, it's right at the top of the page when you get there, also on the Get Started page. There's a mini course you can take, a free mini course called Find Your Voice, Speak Your Truth. And it outlines a process that I actually alluded to in this episode of how to check in with your body, to figure out what you're feeling, how that indicates, what stimulus in the environment triggered you, what your emotions, what your desires are, and what you want to do and what you want to say. And that voice body connection process is my signature offering. And please feel free to take that mini course. It's 45 minutes of content. It's really easy to get through, and I think it'll change your life.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm confident it will. For the
Yeah.
listeners,
Thank you.
you'll be able to check out the show notes at giveaheck.com. Click on Elissa's picture right below it. You can see the show notes. I'll make sure that there's links for your website and any social media connections, including putting a little blurb in there about the course to ensure that they don't forget to check that out. So
thank you.
You're welcome. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Elissa. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.